It's a common complaint you hear from certain NBA fans that every team plays the same in the league today and there's no variety in play styles. And I don't really think that's true at all. Well, there are definitely some shared principles between a lot of different teams that help define the way that the league plays today compared to other eras. It becomes more and more apparent that the closer you look, just how different every team really actually is. Even at the top of the table with all of the league's best teams, there's still so much difference in play style and identity between all those teams. In this video, I'm going to talk about what identity really means in today's NBA, and I'm going to give some examples just to show how much each team wants to do things differently and just how much the play style can really vary. The four teams that I'm going to talk about in this video all won over 50 games in the regular season last year while being above average in terms of both offensive and defensive rating, and all of these teams did it in very different ways. I'm going to talk about the Houston Rockets, the Boston Celtics, the Indiana Pacers, and the Oklahoma City Thunder, who just won the championship. Remember to like the video and subscribe if you want to see more. Also, before I get into it, most of the stats that I'm going to use in this video are from cleaning the glass, with some exceptions, which means that my numbers might be slightly different from ones that you might be able to find yourself, just because cleaning the glass filters out garbage time and heaves in their calculations. Without further ado, though, let's jump right into it. So what do I mean when I talk about identity or play style? The way that I define it is as what the focus of your play style is, kind of on a broad scale. It's also the philosophy that you follow in certain different situations in the game, and to some extent, how the way you do those things is different from other teams. In a general sense, overall identity is very broad, right? Some terms that you might hear to describe a team's identity is like pace and space, five out, motion offense. All of these are terms that give you a kind of basic idea of what a team is all about. Pace and space means you play fast, keep the floor open to give room for quick actions. Five out is all about maximizing spacing and being in position for drive and kick threes. And the motion offense is all about moving around the floor with pin downs and flare screens and stuff to allow catches in space for shots and drives. All those very broad descriptions kind of give you an outline of a team's play style and their identity. If you're a regular NBA viewer and you really watch games, you can also probably think of the teams that those examples are based on. Identity, importantly, makes teams distinct from each other. If you can describe a team's identity and know the team that you're talking about, that's what it means. That broad identity is created by the kind of sum total of all of the different little things that a team wants to do and the different levels of importance placed on different things during a possession by any given team. To give an example of one little thing where teams can differ on identity, you can talk about offensive rebounding, crashing the glass, versus getting back on defense and how a team might approach that. There are so many different angles you can look at for that, just that one question. You can say something like, we have a lot of guys who are very big and physical on the glass, so we're going to be fighting for position during the possession before the shot even goes up. Or you can have something like, we play five out, but our guys are good rebounders, so we'll crash from the corners. Or we're not going to win the offensive rebounding battle. We're just going to get back and focus on transition defense. These are all different ways that can be approached for that one specific situation in a game. And it's the interactions between all of those little choices and all of those little differences in philosophy that kind of create a team's identity. And the important part really is the interaction and how you build everything just from those little small choices individually. To continue with that example, if you get back or crash or whatever you decide to do in that situation, that'll influence how you play transition defense, which will influence how you get set defensively, which will influence how you rotate in a defensive possession, and so on and so forth. The identity is built from the interactions and the total of all of these little different decisions, and building a coherent style based on what you choose to do in all of these little situations is part of creating that identity. That being said, let's jump in and talk about the first team I want to talk about, which is the Houston Rockets. When you look at them, they're not a team that executes offensively in a typical way really at all. When you look at their stats, they're below average in shooting efficiency from just about everywhere on the floor, and they have an effective field goal percentage as a team of about 52.6%, which is good for 24th in the league, right? They also have a shot selection that isn't considered optimal in today's analytics based era. In a league that prioritizes layups and threes for being more efficient shots, the Houston Rockets shoot in the top 10 in mid range shots while shooting almost the fewest threes in the league. On top of that, they don't move the ball a ton either, which is also another hallmark of modern offenses. They're dead last in both assist percentage, which is the amount of baskets you make, the percentage of those that are assisted, and passes made. They're also at dead last in, while being towards the bottom of the league in some other important passing categories as well. All of that results in them having a half court offensive rating of just 93.2, which is in the bottom 10 in the league. However, despite their poor offense in the half court and what some could consider poor offensive procedure, their overall offensive rating still sits at 116.3, which was in the top half of the league last season. So, how is it possible that they do all of these things below average or towards the bottom of the league and still have a top half offensive rating? And for them, the answer comes in the form of their offensive rebounding. The Rockets are definitely unique in the NBA in how they deploy their lineups, specifically for the purpose of grabbing offensive rebounds and generating extra possessions. They have so many different big athletic guys up and down the roster who are all above average offensive rebounders, but at the center of it all are their centers, right? Alperen Sengun and more importantly, Steven Adams off the bench, when deployed individually or even together, as it happened a lot towards the end of the season and in the playoffs, most of those guys are exceptional offensive rebounders on the offensive glass, just between their size, their strength, their ability to find position. Adams especially plays in such a way where he's always able to operate around the rim and use his strength to try and find that position for those offensive rebounds. Thinking Basketball actually did a great video a while back during the season last season where he broke down kind of their style of offensive rebounding and how it contributed to their offense in a lot more detail than I'll go into in this video. I'll link that video in the description for anyone who's interested. That offensive rebounding talent that they have, combined with an emphasis in the game plan on getting those second chance possessions, provides them with a massive offense advantage generated with those second chances. They're first in the league and by a substantial amount in pretty much every single offensive rebounding stat, which results in them scoring nearly 20 points per game off of offensive rebounds. And then in addition to what they can do on the offensive glass, they're also able to generate extra possessions and points off of their strong defense and their ability to generate points off of steals. They get 8.4 steals per game, nearly 70% of which result in a transition opportunity, which is enough to substantially boost their overall offense. To put it simply, their offense is really powered and their team is really powered by their ability to simply take more shots than their opponents. They led the league in field goal attempts per game last season, and that just comes from their offensive rebounding, their turnover generation, and their ability to just create extra shots for themselves, even if they're not a traditionally good offense without that good shot selection, without efficient shooting. Their identity and their focus on offensive rebounding allows them to overcome those hurdles that they might have otherwise offensively. Now, this next team, if the Rockets were a team that succeeds despite an offense that isn't necessarily analytic friendly, the Boston Celtics are a team that lives and dies by those analytics and by those numbers. For the C's, three is more than two, and they know it. Their offense is a machine designed to produce as many quality three-point looks as possible in any different way that they can, whether it be, the Boston Celtics trademark drive and kick swing passes, pull-ups off of high screens for guys like Tatum or Derek White, or guys lifting off of pin down screens to catch and shoot. Basically, their whole offense is designed to generate open three-point looks for their shooters, and that's really enabled by just how much shooting talent is on the team. Pretty much everyone on the team who played serious minutes in their rotation last season, minus their backup big Luke Cornett, was an above average shooter in terms of either volume or efficiency. The Celtics shoot a ridiculous amount of threes. Just over half of their shots come from behind the arc. The next closest team in the league shoots only about 43% of their field goal attempts from three. That really puts them just in a league of their own when it comes to three-point frequency. And as a team, they only shot just over 37% from three, which was 10th in the league. So not bad, but it's only less than 1% above league average, but just the volume that they shoot those threes with makes it so that they're just able to outpace other teams just by barraging them with threes. They make nearly 18 of them a game, good for over 50 points per game from outside the arc, which is, again, most in the league. And their machine like focus on those most valuable shots also extends to the defensive end of the floor, where they hone in on specifically denying corner 3 points and rim field goal attempts while allowing a lot more non corner threes and mid range attempts than you would typically expect. They know that those corner threes and those rim attempts are going to be the most efficient shots for their opponents, and so they work to deny those opportunities. And keeping in line with that, they're also well aware that a free throw is more efficient than any field goal attempt. And so, keeping in line with that focus on denying efficient shots, they're the best in the league at not fouling and not giving up free throws. That superpower they have with their high volume shooting and their ability to just drain so many threes in a game allowed them to have the league's third best offensive rating, despite the fact that they lag in so many other important offensive categories. They have that space and they have that shooting threat, and that allowed them to be very efficient in those limited rim opportunities that they did have, but they still had one of the lowest volumes at the rim of any team. On top of that, they were also one of the slowest teams in basketball. They played very low pace, very few transition opportunities, and they were also dead last in free throw attempts, meaning they didn't get to the line as much as possible. And they were also dead last in paint points as well. All of those things are seen as important or kind of keys to unlocking modern offense, right? Because getting to the basket, getting to the line, attacking a defense in transition when they're not set. All of these things make scoring easier in today's NBA, and yet they still dominate offensively despite not doing any of those things super well because they have that 3 point based identity and they go all in on it. Well, the Rockets first were not a team that moved the ball a ton, and the Celtics then were also not a team that played with a ton of pace. The Indiana Pacers have created an identity where they do both of those things extremely well, and they've consequently created a really exciting and different play style compared to a lot of other teams in the league. The Pacers, above all, are a team that wants to keep the ball moving as quickly as possible. In transition, they're always looking to push the break. They're looking for hit ahead passes into quick pistol actions and things like that to kind of just generate early offense or early looks at offense. And then in the half court, they still keep that level of energy up by getting into those actions as quickly as possible. They keep the ball moving with quick passes. The ball is never stationary on their offense. And then it will flow into a second and a third action if they get stopped on the initial attempt. And all of that kind of results in an offense built perfectly around the players they have, where everyone is able to get involved, everyone's able to score in their own way, and the ball never stops moving. As I said before, the Pacers really do live up to their name with the pace they play with. They're towards the top of the league in pretty much every important transition related stat, and that results in them adding an extra 3.4 points through transition play per 100 possessions, which is the best in the league. Despite the focus that they have on pushing pace and wanting to play in transition, wanting to move the ball quickly, they're still also a great half court team as well. And that comes from the other part of their play style that I mentioned, which is just how well they share the ball and keep the ball moving to try and generate shots. As they were with transition stats, they're towards the top of the league in all passing and assist related stats. That emphasis they have on sharing the ball and keeping everyone involved makes them uniquely egalitarian as an offense compared to other teams in the NBA, where they had 7 players on the roster averaging 10 or more points per game. No other team was able to have that many guys contributing that much offensively. A smaller point, but that is definitely important and makes them unique and it helps contribute to their identity, is just how willing they are as a team to have everyone down the roster take mid range shots that are typically not going to be encouraged by coaches. As a team, they have some of the highest mid range frequency and mid range efficiency of any team because they are willing to take and make the mid range shots that come to them within the flow of their offense because it helps them keep their pace high and helps them avoid getting bogged down in the half court because those mid range shots are typically going to be available even when those rim attempts or those 3 point attempts are also denied. And then in contrast to what the Rockets do, the Pacers really emphasize getting back on defense as opposed to grabbing offensive rebounds. Yeah, the Rockets are also a good transition defense too, but the way that they do it is differently. It's more based on the personnel that they have on the team, whereas the Pacers focus on getting back as a team and having that set defense as much as possible to deny transition opportunities. The Pacers are 29th, so nearly dead last in offensive rebounding rate, while being the best in the league percentage wise in limiting transition opportunities for their opponents, especially those that come off of live rebounds. And they're doing that simply because they're just getting back on offense, or getting back on defense rather, as much as possible and not crashing the boards. That pace that they play with and that passing that they utilize allowed them to be a top 10 offense despite not having, optimal shot selection and not being a super threatening offensive rebounding team. And they also don't have some of the offensive firepower that some of these other teams have as well. Compared to the Rockets and the Celtics from before, the Pacers are a completely different team in how they want to play the game, and yet they still are able to succeed with that unique identity that they have. And even though we've covered three very different high level teams, there's still one more unique group that I want to discuss in this section, and that's going to be the OKC Thunder, the reigning NBA champions. The Thunder were the second best statistical offense last season. They were both good in the half court and in transition, but their real superpower was just how they were able to turn their defense, which was generational, into offense. That Thunder defense is exceptional at forcing turnovers and then consequently limiting their opponent's opportunities to score. They force the most turnovers per game, including the most steals, and they're near the top of the league in limiting opponent field goal attempts per game. That handsiness that they have trying to force those steals also means that they do end up fouling a lot, though, in the pursuit of, trying to force those turnovers. Compare that to Boston, who don't focus as much on generating turnovers and rather not fouling. And you can see a pretty clear difference in what they want to do. OKC is okay with fouling more if it means they generate those turnovers, whereas Boston is okay not generating those turnovers if it means they're not fouling as much. The Thunder were able to score nearly 22 points per game off of the turnovers that they generated, which was the most in the league by a pretty good margin. To kind of put that into perspective, nearly a fifth of their total points scored per game were off of turnovers. They were just able to turn the crazy amount of turnovers that their defense generates into great transition opportunities for themselves. They were tied for fourth in the league, actually, when it came to transition efficiency. So they can not only generate those turnovers, but really capitalize on those turnovers really well. The stat that I saw that really kind of broke my brain in terms of how they were so successful offensively was the differential in the points off of turnovers. So them compared to their opponent averages. So on average, they scored almost 9 points per game more off of turnovers than their opponents, which is enough to swing a huge amount of games. 9 points is a huge difference. Those extra possessions that they generate through forcing those turnovers and getting those steals and whatnot also means that they took the third most field goal attempts of any team, similarly to the Rockets. They're able to win the possession battle, even if they do it in a very different way from the Rockets. The Rockets doing it with offensive rebounding, the Thunder doing it with those turnovers. And then on top of what they do, turning their defense to offense, the Thunder also happen to have the most elite scorer in the NBA in Shai Gilgeous-Alexander to help float them on the offensive end as well. While a team like the Pacers is able to succeed despite not having that top end scoring talent, the Thunder are able to succeed in part because of what SGA is able to do for them scoring the ball. As a team, the Thunder are bottom 5 in the percentage of their baskets being assisted, meaning that they rely more than other teams do on unassisted scoring. Shai is by far the best in the league at unassisted scoring, especially considering the volume that he operates with. He's at the top of the league in usage while still having an absurd nearly 1.3 points per shot attempt, and then only 24% of his baskets are assisted. The impact that he has with his scoring really cannot be understated for this Thunder team. When you compare lineups with him on the floor versus off the floor, The Thunder are a 9.1 point better offensive rating when he's on the floor versus off. And they have a better effective field goal percentage as a team when he's on the floor as well. They're still a good offense when he's not on the floor, but when he is on the floor, they become the best offense in the NBA. Another interesting point in how the Thunder play defensively beyond just what they do generating turnovers is just how different the kind of shots that they want to give up are from a team like Boston. While the Celtics focus on denying those corner threes, like I said before, OKC is perfectly fine giving away those corner threes and helping away from the three-point line to send extra bodies in the paint. And so that results in them giving up a lot of threes, especially those corner threes, but they're also exceptional at locking down the paint just because of how much help they're willing to send. I think it's really illustrative of just how important finding a unique identity is as a team to see how differently two of the three best teams in the league in OKC and Boston last season approached both offense and defense. These teams are so different in how they play, and yet they're both still so elite. To kind of summarize, the Thunder have those two superpowers, their elite scoring talent and then their insane ability to generate offense from defense. And that makes them such an elite team. Even if they don't pass the ball like Indiana, they don't shoot threes like Boston does, and they don't grab offensive rebounds like Houston does. As I said, for those teams, and I'll say again, the offensive strength and the total strength as a team comes from their identity. All of these teams that I talked about and their coaching staff have created their identity as a team to suit the players on the roster. The play style doesn't work without those specific guys on the team, and then in turn, that play style enables those players to do what they are best at by putting them in that position more often. Houston's offensive rebounding is only possible because they have guys like Steven Adams, Şengün, and Amen Thompson, and all of those other guys on the team who are great offensive rebounders. Boston's three-point offense only works because they had stretch bigs with Al Horford and Kristaps Porzingis, and then they have that depth of shooting talent everywhere else. Indiana's offense only works because of what Halliburton and Nembhard and TJ McConnell are able to do, passing the ball, generating paint touches, and finding those passing angles. OKC's offense only works because they have so many guys who can force turnovers on the defensive end, guys who can hit those threes in transition, and then, of course, SGA, and to a lesser extent, a little bit Jalen Williams to create their own shots when they need it. Good teams in the NBA will generally do a lot of things the same way, right? A lot of good teams will play with pace. They'll have a certain kind of shot distribution and so on and so forth. But the truly great teams with great coaches are willing to go all in on what makes the group of players and that roster that they have special. They focus on creating an identity that gives them a clear way in which those 15 players can go out and win games, even if it means they're going against the grain or going against the numbers in certain aspects of the game. Great coaches, truly great coaches, know that they're coaching their players and not 15 league average robots, right? Their guys will have unique strengths and unique weaknesses, and they will find a way to game plan to maximize those strengths while trying to minimize the amount that those weaknesses can come into play. And that's part of the challenge for coaches in this modern NBA era, is balancing what the analytics would say in a league that's all more driven by the numbers than it ever has been, balancing that with the personnel that they have and what they're able to do with those guys, and then finding a way to create the formula for scoring more points than the other team does through their identity. I may or may not do a part 2 of this video talking about what all these good teams do similarly, kind of in contrast to this one. Let me know if you'd be willing to see that or be interested in that at all. That is all I have for you guys in this one. This has been a huge project. I've put a ton of hours into finding the numbers, doing the research, watching certain games, and writing up this script. So if you enjoyed it, please do remember to like the video, subscribe, leave a comment telling me what you thought, because I really enjoyed doing this and I'd like to do more stuff like this in the future. But thank you everybody for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.